Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
I told them very, very adamantly that I wanted them to go to state prison and do their time that Judge Walmsley gave them back on the 7th of January. And then I got up this morning and found out that they had accepted this ridiculous plea. Very disrespectful.
Prison today?
We wanted to hear from
mad as I don't know what. Mad as hell. Because they're trying to do some undercover stuff on me and the mama we didn't know nothing about. Talking about a plea deal, we did not agree with that. And like I say, Ahmaud is a kid you cannot place. You know how valuable Ahmaud was to me, his mama, his brother, his sister, his aunt, his cousin, and all of them. He unplaceable. And he was killed racially. And we want 100% justice, not no half justice. Because you got to think, if an African American man would have did a white man like that, they were trying to kill us on the spot.
The federal trial of the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery is set to start next week. But it's now come out that literally in the middle of the night, Biden's Department of Injustice had cut a deal with the murderers and even tried to sneak this sham deal through court before Ahmaud Arbery's family even knew about it. Worse than that, Biden's DOJ lawyers lied in court, falsely claiming that the family had agreed with the plea deal. Now, the reason that they had to make that false claim is because of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. You'll recall that the first time Jeffrey Epstein got pinched for raping kids, the feds made a deal not to do anything to him. But as we found out later, they never told the families of Epstein's victims about the deal, which, by law, the Crime Victims' Rights Act, they are obligated to do. Well, what happened here was far worse. Biden's DOJ didn't just neglect to tell the Arbery family that they were cutting a deal with the murderers. No, Biden's DOJ went into court yesterday and lied to the court, saying that the family had approved of the deal. What we know about this deal so far is that Travis McMichael, he's the redhead, he had agreed to plead to a single hate crime charge, and the feds agreed to recommend 30 years in federal prison. But the catch is that the feds wanted for their federal sentence to supersede the state charges that Travis and his inbred conspirators had already been convicted of. But even 30 years wouldn't have actually been 30 years because the feds had agreed that the final 5 years of Travis McMichael's sentence he could serve on supervised release from federal prison. So in reality, maybe 25 years, but the feds were already scheming how to get this guy out of prison. The feds were going to try to establish this plea deal as being the pattern for what the other two murderers should get. So in actuality, this was not a prison plea deal. This was an early release plea deal. That's what the feds were working out with the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery, and they didn't want the family to know about it. For the last several weeks, this has been a deal that's been in the offing for a while now. This is exactly what the McMichaels had wanted. And why was it so important to them that the federal charges and federal time supersede state charges? It's because there's no way these murderers are going to avoid spending the rest of their worthless lives in prison. They know that. But what they want is to choose what prison they go to. And as everybody knows, federal prison is a hell of a lot nicer than state prison, especially the hellhole of Georgia. So that's the reason why the McMichaels were so eager to get the feds to cut them a deal, one that would supersede the state charges, which is exactly the opposite of what the Arbery family said they wanted. They know exactly how bad Georgia's prisons are, and they demanded that the state charges supersede the federal ones. That's what all these weeks of hand-wringing by the feds with the murderers' attorneys has really been about, to try to cut these guys a sweetheart prison deal. And had the family of Ahmaud Arbery not been monitoring the situation, the feds would have gotten away with it. Because the family of Ahmaud Arbery was in court yesterday, and they told the judge point blank that not only did they object to letting the murderers go to some cushy federal country club, but that they had never agreed to any such plea deal in the first place. As Ahmaud Arbery's mother testified in court yesterday, granting these men their preferred conditions of confinement would defeat me. It gives them one last chance to spit in my face after murdering my son. After having heard from Ahmaud Arbery's mother and other members of the family, the court agreed that the plea deal couldn't be approved. even though the Department of Justice lawyers insisted in court that the plea deal ought to be approved anyway. Now, since before the state trial verdict was even handed down, the feds have been talking with the murderers' lawyers to work out a plea deal. This makes no sense. These clowns are obviously guilty. The evidence is massive and undeniable. They've already been convicted in state court, and that happened without Travis McMichael's racist social media posts. It's going to be a cakewalk to convict them in federal court since they'll be able to use all of the evidence. And yet the feds have been feverishly working behind the scenes with the murderers' lawyers to cut a deal. The feds don't want to take this to trial. They've got a slam dunk case if there ever was one. Even the McMichaels and their lawyers know it. So, to use a poker analogy, if the feds are holding all the cards, why are they so desperate to fold? It's because there's an unwritten rule when it comes to hate crimes in the U.S. Prosecutors are not to use hate crimes laws when the victim is a black person. I told you about this just last week in Moment of Truth number 62. This is not some coincidence or oversight. This is open, blatant government policy. The government does not want to put these murderers on trial, and they want to make sure that these guys get to serve their time in the cushiest, nicest accommodations possible. This is an expression of federal policy that you're seeing. They made the deal to let the murderers skip going to the hellhole of Georgia State Prison and instead serve their time in some federal country club, where the conditions will be a lot nicer. The conviction of the killers of Ahmaud Arbery wasn't supposed to happen, and it's turned out to be a bloody nose for the administrative arm of white supremacy. After all, how are you supposed to make sure that the irregular forces of white supremacy feel sufficiently safe to carry out murders of black people if you're sending them to prison? Why, this is going to make the next Kyle Rittenhouse or the next McMichaels hesitate or just decide not to do it altogether. So that's what's at stake here. The irregular forces of white supremacy will be demoralized if you start sending them to prison. So we got to send the message that, no, we're fighting for you behind the scenes. Not only do the race killers get convicted, though, but under the GOP legislature of Georgia, their laws are ironclad, making it where when you get convicted, you pretty much got to serve your whole freaking sentence. Nothing short of a gubernatorial pardon will get you out of it, and nobody's going to pardon the McMichaels. Those laws that the GOP legislature in Georgia passed, they were set up to guarantee that black people would be railroaded into prison with no way out, but instead it snared 3 white men. And here the feds come in on a white horse trying to rescue them. Well, fortunately, in this case, it seems that the family of Ahmaud Arbery at least reacted competently and correctly to what was clearly a behind-the-scenes con game being pulled by Joe Biden's Department of Injustice. And just to make sure that there was absolutely no confusion that the feds were trying to pull a con and a trick, Wanda Cooper Jones herself released a statement saying the DOJ has gone behind my back to offer the men who murdered my son a deal to make their time in prison easier for them to serve. I have made it clear at every possible moment that I do not agree to offer these men a plea deal of any kind. I have been completely betrayed by the DOJ lawyers. It doesn't get any clearer than that. Now, while I don't agree with everything that the Arbery family has done in this entire tragic episode, but in this case, I certainly back them 110% on the stance that they're taking now. You've got to be absolutely vehement about this. You got to make it very clear that you're coming at their neck with this one. They're using the right words, that the feds are trying to make the murderer's prison time easier, that this is a betrayal and who it is who's done the betrayal, and that no, you are not in agreement with it. Now, the talking point that the feds are trying to hide behind is they're saying, well, this plea deal, it will require them to confess to their hate crime. They will have to confess their sins. As if that makes cutting these murderers a break any better. This is not about a game of, we got to make you come up with a confession. Who cares about the hot air that comes out of a murderer's mouths? The family of Ahmaud Arbery said it best, a confession is meaningless, and they're right. This isn't the Spanish Inquisition. The purpose here is not to get these guys to confess, it is to make sure that these animals are locked in a cage and that they do the hardest time there is. Any sort of plea deal will merely serve to help them out. This conviction has been handed to the DOJ on a silver platter with a cherry and a bow tie on top. So why did the feds lie? Now, the DOJ prosecutor in this case, Some mammy named Kristin Clark, she tried her damnedest to defend this con game that her office tried to pull. She low-key implied that the family had changed their minds. She didn't take any responsibility for the lies that her office told. Instead, she's trying to make it seem like, well, the family had agreed, but they changed. It's not our fault. They changed their minds. Then she went to tell the judge that the court should ignore the wishes of Ahmaud Arbery's family and approve the plea deal anyway because that would allow some healing to begin. The only ones who can say when the healing begins is the family of Ahmaud Arbery. And if they say that they oppose this plea deal, then to approve it would simply be to inflict more harm on them. But Kristin Clark's saying, if I say that this is what needs to happen, if I say this is the way for healing to begin, you just take my word for it. Ignore these guys. What the hell do they know? Who the hell does this piece of trash think she is? Kristin Clark is the first woman of color to be made the head of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. And it makes sense to call her a woman of color because you won't be surprised to learn that she's also a Jamaican immigrant. Her parents immigrated to the U.S. As the New York Slimes reported during her Senate confirmation, Clark promised that she was committed to ensuring that the thugs in blue have all the resources they need. Though, of course, she never specified what those resources will be used to do. The New York Slimes also reports that Clark got degrees from Harvard and Columbia Law School. Gee, another black immigrant, Barack Obama, also got a law degree from Harvard, and he also was a professor of constitutional law at Columbia University. Yep, when it comes to these bootlicks, it's no accident at all that you keep seeing the exact same names, the exact same schools, the exact same professors, the exact same political patrons coming up over and over again. White supremacy has these bootlicks on a conveyor belt. The main thing that seems to be her primary qualification is that Kristin Clark is all about those voting rights protections. That's the main thing that she's most concerned with. Apparently, that is her singular goal in life. Voting rights protections, which we all know means making sure illegal aliens can vote, since this is part of the Democrats' new would-be voter base meant to counter the pressure black people have been putting on the system. Kristin Clark got her job because she's politically reliable. The Democrats' top priority is stopping the pressure that we're putting on white supremacy, to stop the changes that we're threatening to force on the society. That means they need to dilute our electoral and political influence. So they use immigrants for votes and they use bootlicks like Kristin Clark to be the black faces they can point to and say, black people are fine with all of this racial injustice. Why, look, we got our bootlicking immigrant mammy, Kristin Clark, over here. And this coon, a professional, she says that everything that we're doing is fine and black people are fine with it. And why? She's a woman of color. So if she's not complaining, nobody else should either. That's the game that they're playing here. That's who Kristin Clark is. She pulls a reprehensible trick behind the backs of murder victims to let murderers have a comfortable, cushy stay in prison. Then when she gets called out for it in court, she lies and tells the court, well, just ignore the family anyway. The sheer contempt, the sheer nerve of this heifer. Now, what's interesting is that Clark the Coon had tried to place the blame on Ahmaud Arbery's family's lawyers. That's Sleaze Merritt and Benjamin Crump, for those of you keeping score. Clark was the one who was telling the judge that it was the lawyers for the Arbery family who had said that the Arbery family were not opposed to the plea agreement. Quote, prior to the signing and execution of those plea agreements, the attorneys for the victim's family, Marcus Arbery and mother Miss Wanda Cooper Jones, told the Department of Justice that the parents would not oppose a plea agreement. On Sunday, yesterday, after several meetings, several video conferences, it was apparent that that was not accurate. So Clark admits that on Sunday, the day before she and her lawyers went into court and told this lie, they were well aware that the family was opposed to the plea deal. They were well aware of it before they even went to court. But then, as NBC reports, despite the parents' objections, Clark still advocated for the plea bargain to be accepted. So what this shows, what this proves, is that this was not some accident. This was the plan all along. Your Honor, you should do what we say. Don't worry about the family. They agree with us. Family says, we disagree. Well, Your Honor, we admit they do disagree, but do what we say anyway. Just ignore them. On a side note, I find it interesting that neither Sleaze Merritt nor Mushmouth Crump seem very bothered that the Department of Justice is throwing them under the bus. Kristin Clark is claiming that Sleaze and Crump tried to help circumvent the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Now, what I'm curious about is that if the feds are lying, why aren't Sleaze and Crump saying so? You would think that if some fed whore with a law degree was accusing you of something, you would be vehemently denying it. But Sleaze Merritt's not giving much pushback on this. In fact, I don't know if he said anything contrary at all. Odd. So we have Biden's DOJ under the scurrilous Merrick Garland going to the mat to protect race killers and do whatever they can to help them out, and they've got some black immigrant flunky pushing their lies for them. It angers me that this heifer tried to pull this stunt behind the family's back, but it should enrage all of us that even when Clark got called out in court for it, she still demanded that the court just ignore the family and that this would be the best way to heal. So this Clark piece of trash just went out of her way to insult the family of Ahmaud Arbery and by extension black people in general, because that's what this is about. But for all of you Biden bootlicks and butt kissers out there, take a bow, you morons. I mean, this is so much better than Trump's Department of Justice, isn't it? I mean, this is so much different. This is so much better than Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III and his Klansmen, right? I've been trying to find all the people who were cheerleading for Biden 2 years ago, and they've all been in hiding, and they've stayed in hiding. You scumbags need to come out and take a bow on this one. Biden's making it clear that he's on the side of the white supremacist. Clark was adamant that there not be a trial, and that wasn't some oversight. That's policy from the Biden administration. The fact that she even had the nerve to pull this stunt, and then when she got called out on it, she doubled down on it and said, okay, you caught me, I admit to it. Go ahead and do what I said anyway. That lets you know this wasn't some oversight. This was deliberate. Either this was something she came up with because she thought it would ingratiate herself with her white supremacist masters, or she was just taking direct orders. Either way, this was intentional. What's going on here is a white supremacist political agenda. This is about Biden wanting to preserve the legal principle that hate crime laws don't apply when the victim is black, and that this is official policy, and that Biden's DOJ is going to aggressively enforce that policy. Hate crimes laws don't apply if the victim is black. This is about not wanting to antagonize the good old boys down south during an election year. So we see that the exact same legal games that were being played down in Georgia when that Kim Lacey or Jackie Lacey, whatever the hell her name is, when that DA got caught, here she is, best buds with the McMichaels, cutting them all sorts of deals and breaks and refusing to prosecute. And then when the prosecution was actually forced to because of public pressure after the video was made public, then they decide, well, we're not bringing up any of the racial stuff. We don't want to offend the white jurors. And now you got the feds saying, cut these guys a break. And why are we trying to give them such a hard time anyway? Yeah, you see that there's a program at work here. There's an organized effort at work here. And it has nothing to do with how difficult or easy the case is. This is an easy one. This is a slam dunk. And yet you see them go into the mat, not because they think the case is difficult, but precisely because it would be so easy. This is the principle of white immunity from law that they are attempting to protect and to preserve. And it's Biden's Department of Injustice who's doing it. So what does this tell us? It confirms what we've always known, that anti-black racism is a bipartisan issue. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Busey, Nyan Pharmacy, Murad Campbell, Brandon, and Keith. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.